before the Sabbath fell at the cross. The sun hung low behind darkening clouds, and a chill wind carried the smell of iron and dust. The place of the skull was crowded with onlookers who flinched as a hammer struck bone. Mary clutched her shawl as she stood near the rough beam where her firstborn hung. Her sister and another Mary supported her, but she barely felt their hands. John, with red eyes, stayed at her side. Jesus looked down. His voice, cracked with thirst, found strength enough for tenderness. "Woman, here is your son," he said, gazing at John. Then to the beloved disciple, "Here is your mother." John nodded through tears, understanding that this was more than a household arrangement. It was legacy and covenant. From that hour, he treated Mary as his own. Crack, crack. Roman soldiers began to break the legs of the criminals beside Jesus. Mary flinched at the sound. A man in fine linen, hidden in the crowd, pressed forward. Joseph of Arimathea's eyes darted to the centurion and then to Mary. A member of the council, he had stayed silent when others condemned Jesus. Now secrecy felt like betrayal. He drew nearer, stopping at her side, and spoke in a low voice. "Honored lady," he murmured, "the hour is nearly gone. The bodies must not remain on the cross when the Sabbath begins. I have a tomb near the garden. If I can gain permission from Pilate, may I lay him there?" Mary looked into his face. Behind his composed demeanor she saw fear and resolve. She remembered him from a distance in the Sanhedrin chamber, his silence heavy as a stone. "You would do this?" she whispered, her words thick with grief. Joseph nodded. "I should have spoken when they cried, 'Crucify.' Let me at least see his body treated with dignity. I know the risk. I may lose my standing, even my life. But I cannot leave him hanging under the open sky." Mary's fingers clutched at the cross's splintered wood. She understood risk. She had fled to Egypt when her son was a toddler to escape another tyrant. Now, at this second flight, her heart ached to keep him close. "Do what you must," she said, her voice trembling. "I will wait." Joseph pressed his hand over his heart in assent. He glanced at John. "Stay with her. Keep watch until I return." As Joseph strode away toward the governor's palace, Mary turned her gaze back to her son. The sky grew darker. With a last cry, "It is finished!" Jesus bowed his head and yielded up his spirit. The earth seemed to hold its breath. Mary felt as if the world had tilted, as if she stood upon the edge of some great abyss. Yet within that void was a strange assurance, a seed of faith planted long ago. She clung to it as she waited for Joseph's return, for the descent from the cross, and for whatever path God would draw for her beyond this hill. Seeking permission. The governor's courtyard kept its own darkness. Tapestries hung to muffle the street noise. Torches hissed with burning fire. Joseph of Arimathea waited between a pair of marble columns. A Roman clerk sat at a table, wax tablet ready. He hardly looked up. "Name, business?" "Joseph, son of Matthias of Arimathea," Joseph answered. "I seek permission from the prefect to bury a crucified man before the Sabbath begins." The clerk's stylus paused mid-stroke. "Who?" "Jesus of Nazareth." For a breath, the only sound was the hiss of torches. Down the hall, a centurion leaned against a pillar, reading a scrap of parchment by torchlight. His brow knotted as his lips moved silently over lines from home. Joseph caught the words "vineyard" and "Marcus." The soldier folded it away when he saw Joseph watching, and tucked it under his belt with a soft snort, an Easter egg in a place of death. The clerk narrowed his eyes. "Wait here." Joseph inclined his head and swallowed the taste of fear. Memories of the council chamber, of the silence he now regretted, flickered like shadows. Moments later, a slave in a tunic beckoned him. Joseph followed into a room where Pontius Pilate sat beneath a painted eagle, shoulders slumped, a cup of wine untouched at his elbow. Candles threw ridges of shadow across his tired face. "You ask to take this man's body," Pilate said without preamble. His voice was low, as if he did not want to wake the walls. "Our law forbids that the dead hang overnight," Joseph replied. "I have a new tomb nearby. I will tend him quickly and quietly." Pilate studied him, eyes tracing the cut of his robe, the lines of age, the weight of decision. "Are you his disciple?" Joseph chose honesty, cloaked in formality. "I am a son of Israel. I cannot let the Sabbath begin with him bleeding in the sun." Behind him, the centurion from the hall stepped forward, tall, with a scar over one cheek. He saluted. "Prefect, the Nazarene is dead. We verified." His voice held no tremor. Joseph wondered what letters lay unread in his satchel. Pilate drummed his fingers on the armrest, then glanced at the soldier. "Very well. Take him down and bury him, but be quick." Relief fluttered through Joseph, tempered by grief. He bowed deeply. "Thank you." His fingers brushed the governor's ring as the clerk pressed a sealed writ into his palm. On his way out, Joseph passed the centurion. "Orders are orders," the soldier murmured. Joseph nodded. "And mercy is mercy." Outside, dusk cooled the stone. He pulled his cloak tighter and turned down a side street, where a figure waited beneath an arch. "Nicodemus," Joseph whispered. Nicodemus, bearded and grave, held a bundle that perfumed the air with myrrh and aloes. "They let you take him?" Joseph held up the wax tablet. Pilate granted it. "Good." Nicodemus's gaze flicked back the way Joseph had come. "There are watchers. We must hurry." They walked together toward Golgotha, shadows lengthening at their feet. At a corner, a lamp seller packed his wares. On impulse, Joseph bought the last little oil lamp. Its clay was stamped with a fish, an old symbol of the sea and, lately, of a hope whispered among followers. He slipped it inside his cloak. As they approached the hill, Joseph could see the crosses silhouetted against the deepening sky, and he felt each step as if it walked across his own chest. The writ of permission weighed warm in his hand. Behind them, the centurion's voice carried softly through the dusk, reading a letter's closing line. "Come home soon." The words faded with the light as Joseph and Nicodemus climbed toward the place of skulls, intent on an act of mercy that would echo far beyond that night. The burial dust settled in the hollows of Golgotha as evening greeted the horizon. Soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, cutting ropes, hauling bodies. Mary remained beneath the central cross, her hands wrapped around the splintered wood as if it still held warmth. The beloved disciple stood beside her, silent, his cloak pulled tight against the growing chill. Footsteps approached, 2 sets, quick and purposeful. Joseph of Arimathea returned, linen folded over his arm, a sealed writ in his hand. Beside him walked Nicodemus. The centurion on duty eyed them. "You have the governor's word?" he asked, his voice roughened by a day of commands. Joseph held up the wax tablet. "We will be swift." He nodded toward Mary. "His mother is here." The soldier's gaze flicked to the woman clasping the cross. Something softened there. His hand brushed his belt, as if to feel the crinkled parchment he had tucked there earlier. He lifted his spear in assent. "Do what you must." When at last Jessica's body was given to them, Mary gasped, not at blood or broken flesh, but at the sudden, unbearable lifelessness of him. She cradled his head a moment, smoothing hair matted with thorns. "My son," she breathed, her voice thick as oil. "My son." "We must wrap him," Nicodemus said gently. The urgency of the Sabbath pressed hard against their grief. Together they stretched the linen shroud Joseph had brought. Nicodemus sprinkled the mixture of myrrh and aloes across Jesus' body, the spices pooling in wounds, their scent rising like incense. Joseph folded the cloth carefully, covering limbs that had always been open to heal and bless. His hands shook once. Mary steadied them. "You had a tomb prepared?" she asked. "In a garden nearby," Joseph replied. "No one has ever been laid there. It is cut from the rock. It will be safe." His words carried more meaning than he spoke aloud. He was offering not only stone, but shelter from further desecration. They lifted the wrapped body, Joseph at the head, Nicodemus at the feet, John supporting Mary as she followed. Evening birds had begun their last calls. In a nearby courtyard, a father's voice could be heard instructing his child. The garden lay in the shadow of the quarry. A new tomb yawned in the rock face, its entrance cool and dark. Joseph went inside first, setting the oil lamp he had purchased on a ledge, its small flame casting a halo on the hewn walls. They laid Jesus on the stone ledge, aligning his body with care. Mary stood at the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, committing the place to memory. She would later recall the angle of the olive tree, the white of the limestone, the way the lamp's light flickered against the curves of the interior. Nicodemus arranged the spices once more, then stepped back. "It is finished," Joseph whispered, echoing words spoken hours earlier. He took hold of the round stone and with Nicodemus heaved it into place. The stone thudded against the groove, sealing the darkness. Mary watched the last sliver of lamplight vanish. "We will return after the Sabbath," Mary said quietly to the younger women gathered behind her. "We will finish what love demands." Her voice was steady now, anchored by a resolve deeper than grief. Joseph wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. He glanced toward the city where torches were being lit for the Passover meal. "Go now," he said softly. "Hide if you must. There will be questions." "And you?" Mary asked. "I will see to my household," Joseph answered. He hesitated. "Pray for me, Mother of Jesus." She touched his arm. "We are all held in the same hand." They departed the garden as the first stars pricked the sky. Behind them, the tomb sat silent, sad. Seeds of resurrection. The Sabbath passed like a long night with no stars. Behind shuttered doors, Mary sat in John's household, her hands still smelling faintly of resin and linen. The songs of Passover floated faintly from neighboring homes, but to her they were muffled, as though the whole world had been wrapped in grave clothes. Joseph of Arimathea, meanwhile, rode north beneath a half-veiled moon. His cloak hooded his face, his horse's hooves hushed by the dust of the Jericho road. He carried no banners of defiance, only the silence of a man who had chosen mercy at the cost of safety. At each milestone, his heart whispered the same prayer: "Hide me until your wrath has passed, but do not hide forever what you have sown." By dawn of the first day of the week, the city stirred again. The women, restless from grief, prepared spices. Mary Magdalene was the first to rise, urging the others. "We will go at least to keep watch, to weep if nothing else." Love cannot stay inside. Mary went with them. The streets were pale with dew. A few soldiers yawned at their posts. Rumors had already flown. Some said a guard had been stationed at the tomb. Others, that Pilate wanted no disturbance among the graves. The women whispered prayers as they hurried, clutching jars of oil and bundles of cloth. The olive tree was the same. The birds sang as they had 2 nights before. But the stone, it was rolled aside. The women froze. Magdalene's jar slipped, spilling oil into the dust. Mary's heart pounded with both terror and recognition. Once again, she felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. She stepped forward, hands trembling. Behind her, the younger women clutched one another. The world seemed to tilt as it had on the hill, but this time not toward despair. Something had shifted in the fabric of earth itself, as though the very stone had groaned awake. Mary remembered Joseph's whispered vow in the garden. Seeds are sown in hidden places. She looked into the tomb and knew the seed had broken open. What they buried in grief had risen beyond their reach. And so the story turned, not with trumpets or banners, but with women at dawn, jars fallen in the dust, a stone rolled away. Their choice to honor him in the shadow of death had become witness to life uncontrollable. Epilogue. The road beyond the city did not grow kinder in the days that followed. Whispers clung to the alleys of Jerusalem like smoke. Rumors of a body missing, soldiers bribed, visions of angels, disciples scattered, filled homes and marketplaces alike. The council raged in their chambers while Roman patrols tightened their watch. For Mary and Joseph of Arimathea, the garden tomb was both sanctuary and danger. So Joseph slipped quietly to the coast, his household gathered in secrecy. Later generations would tell how he fled beyond Judea altogether, and how a ship carried him west across the salt waters, bearing with him a holy relic of remembrance, the vessel of the Last Supper, the cup, later called the Grail. In the mists of Britain, so the legend says, he planted both staff and faith. At Glastonbury, the thorn tree bloomed out of season, and monks would one day claim Joseph was here. Whether history or holy imagination, the tale clings like ivy to stone. Mary, meanwhile, found shelter with John, the beloved disciple. Some say she remained in Jerusalem until her final breath. Others record her presence in Ephesus, her years spent in prayer near the groves of Artemis. There, by the Aegean wind, she is said to have ended her days in quiet dignity. Her sorrow transfigured into wisdom for those who came seeking the story of her son. Pilgrims would later mark her resting place, the house of the mother, where her presence lingered like a candle flame that never gutters out. 2 lives, one a counselor, one a mother, bound together at the cross, scattered afterward by necessity, yet both carrying the same fire. History records fragments, legends fill the gaps, and faith ties both together. What endures is not the certainty of where they dwelled, but the beauty of what they dared. And so the story closes not at a tomb, nor even at an empty garden, but on the road. Mary in Asia, Joseph in the Western Isles, both sowing seeds unseen. Their names, whispered in scripture and legend alike, remind us that the story of resurrection does not end with dawn. It journeys onward, wherever courage carries those who believe that love cannot be sealed by stone. The end